Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged.
Building.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Building.
Reporting. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Insufficient
Reporting.
funds.
Yes, sir.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Commander. Indeed.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Reporting. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit
Yes, sir.
lost.
Acknowledged.
Base is under attack. Unit lost.
Acknowledged.
Unit lost.
Acknowledged.
Building infiltrated.
Awaiting
Yes, sir.
orders. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. At once. Ready and waiting. Yes, sir.
Prepared.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Insufficient funds.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Waiting orders. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir. Reporting.
Acknowledged.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Acknowledged.
Prepared. Prepared. Prepared.
Yes, sir.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready. Building. Repairing.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Insufficient funds.
Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Repairing. Construction complete. Unit ready. Building. Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Our base is under attack.
Acknowledged.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Preparing. Training.
Yes, sir.
Vehicle reporting.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Vehicle
Training.
reporting. Yes, sir.
Construction complete. Unit ready.
Affirmative.
Building. Insufficient funds. Building. Repairing.
Yes, sir. Reporting. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Unit ready.
Awaiting
Construction complete.
orders. Affirmative.
Repairing. Unit ready. Building. Repairing.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Vehicle reporting. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Waiting.
Building.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Yes, sir.
Building.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Reporting.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
Insufficient funds.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Awaiting orders. Acknowledged.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged.
Unit ready. Building. Our base is under attack.
Ready and waiting. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Repairing.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Unit ready. Building.
Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting.
Unit ready.
Affirmative.
Building.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Reporting.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged.
Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Awaiting
Yes, sir.
orders.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit
Affirmative.
ready. Building.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready. Building.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Insufficient funds.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Building.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Affirmative.
Building.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative.
Our base is under attack.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Vehicle. Affirmative.
Ready and waiting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Unit lost. Unit
Yes, sir.
lost.
Ready and waiting. Of course.
Unit lost.
Reporting.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Insufficient
Acknowledged.
funds.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Acknowledged.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Insufficient
Acknowledged.
funds.
Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged.
Construction complete.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. For king and country.
Unit lost. New construction options. Repairing. 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 Unit ready.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir.
Waiting orders. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Ready and waiting. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Waiting orders. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
At once.
Affirmative.
Building
Yes, sir.
infiltrated. Building infiltrated. Unit lost.
Vehicle reporting.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Insufficient
Reporting.
funds.
Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged.
Training.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit
Affirmative.
ready. Training.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Affirmative.
Training.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Moving out.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged.
Training.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Reporting.
Insufficient funds.
Affirmative.
Yeah. Okay. Moving out.
Credits stolen.
What? Okay.
Unit ready. Credits stolen. Building. Repairing.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Repairing.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Training.
What? Okay.
Unit ready. Building.
Yes, sir.
Unit ready. Training.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Waiting affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Huh? Door bang bomb.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Waiting
Building.
orders. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Vehicle. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Acknowledged.